Two women wake up at the same hour. One runs a business from her mansion. The other rushes to scrub floors in silence. But the real difference isn't money. It's mindset. So I ask you, do you want to be the rich wife or the poor maid? Let me tell you something that may sound simple, but it's the foundation of everything. Mindset defines your destiny. It's not your background, not your parents, not your education, not your connections. It's the way you think that will determine how far you go in life. Let's look at two women. One wakes up in silk sheets, checks her schedule, and makes decisions that move millions. The other wakes up before dawn, exhausted, stressed, and gets to work cleaning someone else's house. They both live under the same sky, breathe the same air. So why is one living a life of abundance and the other stuck in struggle? The difference didn't start with money. It started with mindset. I still remember my early days. I applied for jobs at 30 different places. Not one company wanted me. I walked into KFC with hope. 24 people applied and 23 were accepted. I was the only one rejected. Even the delivery boy got the job. I wasn't handsome, I didn't have rich parents, and I failed my exams more than once. My English was broken, and people laughed at the way I talked. I had every reason to quit, to believe I wasn't good enough. But I didn't let rejection define my mind. I grew up poor, not just financially, but in confidence. I came from a small town where dreams were smaller than the streets we walked. But I had one thing, the belief that things could change if I changed how I thought. I realized poor people wait for things to happen, while the rich make things happen. That realization shifted my life. People always think being rich is about having more money, but it's not. Being rich is about having more vision. The rich wife doesn't just see the world as it is, she sees it as it could be. That's mindset. She believes in her capacity to change her situation. She sees problems as puzzles, not prisons. She doesn't say, I can. She says, how can I? That one mental shift can change your entire future. The poor maid often doesn't believe she deserves more. She might work harder than anyone, but she doubts herself at every step. She might tell herself, this is the life I was born into. This is all I'll ever be. And the mind listens. The mind doesn't argue, it obeys. If you tell it you're weak, it believes you. If you tell it you're not smart enough, it will stop trying. But if you tell it, I will find a way, I will grow, I will rise, then your actions begin to follow that belief. When I started my first venture, I didn't know anything about business. I didn't have investors lining up. I didn't even have the right resources. But I had people around me who believed in the dream. We were broke, confused, and laughed at, but we kept showing up. Mindset again. Most people give up not because of failure, but because they believe they don't deserve success. The rich wife understands this. She builds herself before she builds her business. She knows her most valuable asset isn't her house, her car, or her income. It's her mindset. That's what helps her stay calm in crisis. That's what helps her see opportunities in the middle of chaos. When others panic, she plans. When others give up, she grows. And that's not luck. That's mindset trained by adversity. The poor maid may be stuck, not because she isn't capable, but because she's surrounded by voices that keep her small. She may hear, you can't, so often that she stops even trying. I've been there. I know what it's like to be told, you're not good enough. But here's the truth. What they say doesn't matter nearly as much as what you say to yourself. I failed so many times that people began to expect my failure, but I didn't care. I told myself one day they will see what I see. One day they will understand why I didn't give up. And even when I had nothing, I thought like a person who had everything, not in arrogance, but in vision. I imagined better days, even when I was walking in darkness. That's what mindset does. It gives you light before the sun even rises. So when you ask yourself, rich wife or poor maid, understand this. It's not about who has more money. It's about who has more mental freedom. You can be wealthy and still think poor. You can be broke and still think like a queen. Your mindset is the seed. Everything else is the fruit. Your future doesn't begin with your bank account. It begins with your belief. People often ask me, what's the real difference between someone who rises and someone who remains stuck? I tell them, it's not luck, it's not talent, and it's certainly not background. The difference lies in habits. Not what you do once in a while, but what you do every single day. That's what separates those who lead from those who follow. That's what separates the rich wife from the poor maid. Habits are invisible forces. They are small, silent choices that compound over time. You don't notice their impact immediately, but they're shaping you every day. If your habits are strong, your future becomes strong. If your habits are weak, your future will collapse. Quietly, slowly, but surely. I know this because I've lived it. When I started out, I didn't have a great education, a powerful network, or strong English. I struggled with the basics. I failed my exams multiple times. I didn't come from a place where people had big dreams. In fact, dreaming too big was seen as dangerous. They told me to be realistic, to settle for less, to find a safe job. And I tried. I applied to so many companies. Dozens of them. I was rejected every time. Some jobs didn't even bother to respond. But I noticed something. The people who succeeded, they weren't necessarily smarter than me. They just had better habits. They got up earlier. They read more. They stayed focused while others were distracted. They were consistent when others quit. That changed the way I thought. I didn't need to change who I was. I needed to change what I did every day. So I started with small things. I began reading for 30 minutes every day. I forced myself to practice English even when people laughed at me. I watched how successful people made decisions, how they managed their time. I began to shift my daily routines, not all at once, but one step at a time. Slowly, those small changes began to rewire how I saw the world. The rich wife doesn't rise because she's lucky. She rises because her habits support her rise. She sets boundaries around her time. She doesn't scroll mindlessly for hours or waste her energy on drama. She's disciplined in silence, and that discipline shows in her results. When others are sleeping, she's planning. When others are doubting, she's doing. Her lifestyle reflects her habits, and her habits reflect her mindset. Now, let's talk about the poor maid. She may be hardworking, no doubt about it. She wakes up early, she works all day, sometimes in multiple homes, and she goes to bed tired. But here's the truth. Being busy is not the same as being productive. Hard work without direction is just exhaustion. If your habits keep you running in circles, it doesn't matter how hard you run, you'll never escape. I've seen people stuck in the same place for years, not because they aren't talented, but because their habits keep them small. They watch TV instead of learning. They blame instead of improving. They repeat instead of redesigning. And the worst part, they don't even realize it. Their habits have become their identity. I remember when I first started building my business, had no money. My team was small. My English was still broken. People laughed at our ideas. They said, it'll never work. And to be honest, some days I believed them. But I kept working. Every morning I woke up and said, what can I do today to move one step forward? Not 10 steps, just one. I wrote ideas. I studied the market. I called people. The most said no, but I kept going every day like clockwork. My habits became my survival. They became my strategy. You see, success isn't built in a weekend. It's built in years of unseen effort. People only notice you once you've already transformed, but they never see the habits that carried you through your darkest days. They don't see the nights you stayed up learning, the mornings you got up before the sun, the distractions you ignored, the temptations you overcame, but all of that, that's what builds the rich wife. And even now, when people tell me I'm successful, I don't credit luck. I credit the years of habits that shaped who I became. I still wake up early. I still read. I still challenge myself to grow. Because the moment you relax your habits, you begin to fall. So if you feel stuck right now, don't try to change your entire life in one day. Just change one habit. Read instead of scrolling. Plan instead of guessing. Learn instead of blaming. Replace one lazy habit with one disciplined one. That's how transformation begins. Quietly, daily, relentlessly. Because at the end of the day, your future isn't decided by your past, it's decided by your patterns. There's something I've learned after years of failure, rejection, and eventual success. Your self-worth sets your standards. Not your income, not your education, not your connections. It's the way you see yourself that determines what you accept, what you pursue, and what you settle for. If you believe you're worth very little, you will allow the world to treat you like you are. But the moment you realize your value, everything starts to change. Not because the world suddenly respects you, but because you stop tolerating what you no longer deserve. There was a time I didn't feel I was worth much. I remember applying to so many jobs, thinking maybe just one person would give me a chance. I was rejected from places that most people would never expect to be rejected from. Even a fast food job turned me down. I wasn't confident. I wasn't fluent in English. I looked ordinary and I came from a small background. Everything around me seemed to confirm what I feared inside, that maybe I just wasn't good enough. And that's a very dangerous belief because once you accept it, your standards drop. You start saying yes to things that don't align with your potential. For years, I kept my dreams small because I believed I was small. I accepted low-paid jobs. I stayed quiet in rooms where I had ideas. And I apologized for wanting more. But over time, I began to realize something. Nobody was going to come and increase my value for me. I had to do that myself. I had to decide that I was worthy of more, even when I had nothing to show for it. Yet, that shift didn't happen overnight. It came after years of being overlooked, undervalued, and underestimated. I started to change the way I spoke to myself. Instead of asking, why would they choose me? I began asking, why not me? I reminded myself that my ideas mattered. I trained myself to think like someone who deserved a seat at the table. I stopped waiting for permission to believe in myself. And slowly, my standards began to rise. I no longer accepted disrespect. I no longer stayed in partnerships where I was not valued. I no longer worked with people who doubted everything I brought to the table. And let me tell you this clearly. When your self-worth rises, your world begins to shift. The rich wife doesn't accept less than what she knows she's worth. That doesn't mean she's arrogant. That doesn't mean she walks around acting superior. No, it means she knows her time is valuable. Her voice is valuable. Her energy is valuable. So she protects it. She doesn't chase people who don't see her worth. She doesn't stay in environments that belittle her growth. She builds a life that aligns with how she sees herself. But the poor maid often does not yet see her value. She may be full of talent and heart, but because she hasn't been taught to believe in herself, she keeps accepting crumbs. She stays in relationships that drain her. She keeps working in places that don't pay her enough or respect her. She lowers her voice, lowers her dreams, and lowers her boundaries. Not because she lacks ability, but because she hasn't yet claimed her value. And I understand that. I've been there. There was a time I accepted low deals just to survive. I let people talk down to me in meetings. I felt like I had to constantly prove myself. But I learned that the world treats you how you train it to treat you. If you carry yourself with low self-worth, people will mirror that. But when you begin to stand with quiet confidence, when you begin to walk like you know who you are, even if you're still building your success, people start to treat you differently. One of the hardest things I ever had to do was walk away from situations that didn't value me. Because when you come from nothing, anything feels like something. But the real power comes when you stop accepting anything and start demanding alignment with your worth. That's when things begin to open up. That's when new doors appear. Doors that never existed when your standards were low. People often say, but what if I raise my standards and no one meets them? Then you wait. You keep building yourself. You don't lower your standards. You elevate your circle. You surround yourself with people who speak life into you, who remind you of your worth, who challenge you to grow. And most importantly, you become the kind of person who doesn't just demand value, you will live it. Because your self-worth isn't just about how others see you. It's about how you see you. That belief is the starting point for every decision, every relationship, every opportunity. And if you don't claim your value, someone else will define it for you. Raise your worth, and your life will rise with it. There's one thing that every successful person understands deeply. Time is either spent or invested. Every day, you're making a choice. Are you using time in a way that will give you a return? Or are you just passing it, letting it slip through your fingers like water? That one decision, made again and again, is what divides a rich wife from a poor maid. Not the hours in a day, but what's done with them. Everyone gets the same 24 hours. The difference is how we use them. Some people use time like a currency. They spend it on distractions, gossip, comfort, or regret. Others treat it like capital. They invest it into skills, ideas, health, vision. That's what I had to learn early on, even when I had nothing. I remember those days clearly. I wasn't rich. I wasn't even comfortable. I had no background, no business education, no support from people with power. I failed my college entrance exams. I was rejected from dozens of jobs, places others got into easily. I was told no so many times that even I started to wonder if I had anything to offer. But I still had time, and I realized time was the only thing they hadn't taken from me. That was the one thing I could control. So I started treating time like it was gold. I stopped spending hours trying to impress people or prove myself to those who couldn't see my value. I stopped wasting time feeling sorry for myself. Instead, I began learning. Every spare moment I read, I listened, I studied, I improved my English word by word. I watched how other people solved problems. I took notes on leadership, strategy, communication. And I didn't do this for applause. I did it because I knew every hour I invested today would grow into something tomorrow. A rich wife doesn't magically become successful. She's intentional with her time. She's not reacting to life. She's designing it. She chooses her moments. She gives attention to what builds her, not what drains her. She doesn't waste hours comparing her life to others, scrolling endlessly, or entertaining people who don't respect her time. She guards her minutes because she knows what they're worth. On the other side, the poor maid may work long hours, but often doesn't invest in herself. Her time is spent in survival, moving from one task to another without a break to think about the future. She's stuck in routines that repeat but don't grow her. It's not because she's lazy. It's because no one told her her time is valuable, that she has the right to use her time not just for others but for herself. I've met people who work harder than anyone I've ever seen, but they were still stuck, not because of a lack of work ethic, but because all their time was spent, never invested. If you're always doing and never building, you'll always feel exhausted but never fulfilled. Time invested creates growth. Time spent without purpose creates burnout. Even when I had nothing, no money, no confidence, no business, I made time my business. I'd sit for hours at night learning about industries I wanted to be part of, even when I didn't understand most of it yet. I studied how other countries built technology, how markets moved, how entrepreneurs thought. I didn't have money to invest, but I had time. And I treated it like the most precious thing I owned. I still remember people around me laughing at how I spend my time. They said, "Why are you working so hard? You're not even successful yet." But I understood something they didn't. If I used my time like they did, I'd end up where they were. So I stayed focused. I said no to distractions. I said no to shortcuts. And most of all, I said yes to the long silent hours where nobody was watching, but the future was being built. One of the biggest lies people believe is, I'll do it when I have more time. But the truth is, you'll never get more time. You only get different priorities. If it's important, you'll find a way. If not, you'll find an excuse. The rich wife makes time work for her. She multiplies it by making smart decisions, by reading instead of scrolling, by building skills instead of chasing comfort, by reflecting instead of reacting. If you want to change your life, you must change how you use your time. Look at your daily habits. Track where your minutes go. Are you building or just surviving? Are you feeding your future or just numbing your present? These are not just questions, they are mirrors. And they reveal what kind of life you're truly creating. Because in the end, time doesn't lie. It tells the story of who we really are. If there's one truth I've learned that most people overlook, it's this. Your environment either elevates you or erodes you. The people you spend time with, the voices you listen to, the energy you surround yourself with, these things are not neutral. They are shaping you quietly and consistently. And over time, they either push you forward or pull you down. When I look back at the earlier years of my life, I can clearly see how much my environment affected me. I didn't grow up in a place where people encouraged big dreams. No one was talking about innovation, entrepreneurship, or changing the world. In fact, when I told people I wanted to do something meaningful, something that could grow beyond my small town, they looked at me like I was crazy. Their words weren't always harsh, but their doubts were constant. You? Start a business? You can't even speak proper English. Just find a job and settle. And for a while, I believed them, not because they were right, but because I heard those voices every day. They were everywhere. Friends, teachers, even family. That was my environment. And when you hear the same message over and over, it becomes part of your thinking, even if you don't realize it. I started to question my ability. I began to shrink my ideas. I tried to fit in instead of standing out. That's what a negative environment does. It doesn't crush you all at once. It slowly convinces you to stop trying. But at some point, something in me started to resist. I realized that if I didn't change the people around me, I would never change the path in front of me. So I began to distance myself from those voices. Not because I was better than them, but because I wanted better for myself. I started spending time with people who believed in growth, even if there were few. I surrounded myself with books, talks, articles, anything that could feed my mind something different. I couldn't afford a great network, so I built one out of words, stories, and ideas. I listened to those who had failed and risen again. I read about people who had built from zero, just like me. That became my new environment. The rich wife understands this. She protects her environment like her future depends on it, because it does. She doesn't spend time with people who constantly gossip, complain, or bring negativity. She's not interested in drama or distraction. She's focused on growth. She seeks out mentors, uplifters, and creators. She listens to ideas that stretch her, not limit her. She surrounds herself with people who remind her of who she's becoming, not who she used to be. But the poor maid often stays trapped in the environment she's always known. Not because she wants to, but because she doesn't realize how much is shaping her. She might have dreams, but the people around her laugh at them. She might want more, but her circle convinces her that more is dangerous. So she stays small, she follows the routine, she silences her ambition. Not because she's weak, but because her environment keeps her grounded in all the wrong ways. I remember building my company in those early days. We had no money, no recognition, no proper office, just a tiny apartment with a few people and a big dream. But what kept us going wasn't the comfort of the place. It was the energy in the room. Everyone believed in something bigger. We encouraged each other. We solved problems together. We stayed up late, not because we were forced to, but because we wanted to. That was an environment of growth, even when the resources were missing. It taught me that your environment doesn't have to be rich, it has to be right. If I had stayed in the places where people kept doubting me, I would still be stuck in the same place. I would never have taken the risks I did. I would have played it safe, lived quietly, and followed a path someone else designed. But I chose to build a new space around me, one where growth wasn't just possible, It was expected. Sometimes the hardest part of rising isn't the work itself. It's walking away from the people who don't want you to rise. That takes courage. But you have to understand this. Loyalty to the wrong environment is betrayal to your own potential. You're not obligated to stay in spaces that shrink you. You owe it to yourself to step into places that expand you. Your future is not just in your hands, it's in your surroundings. Choose wisely, because your environment is either the wind beneath your wings or the weight on your shoulders. There's a moment in every life where the truth becomes clear. No one is coming to choose for you. The world will give you many options, many voices, many distractions, but in the end, the choice is always yours. Whether you become the rich wife or remain the poor maid doesn't depend on your background, your family, or your education. It depends on the decisions you make every day, especially the ones no one sees. I wasn't born with privilege. I had no powerful relatives, no fancy education, and no strong command of the English language. I failed exams. I applied to dozens of jobs and got rejected from all of them. I remember walking home after being turned away from even basic jobs. Jobs where others were accepted without question. And I could have said, that's just how life is. I could have believed the world had already decided for me, but I didn't. I chose differently. I chose to believe that rejection wasn't the end. It was a signal to look within. I chose to learn even when no one was watching. I chose to build even when no one believed. I chose to dream when everyone else settled. That's the power of choice. It's not loud. It's not dramatic. It's quiet, personal, and daily. It's the decision to rise again and again, even when your circumstances say you shouldn't. You see, the rich wife doesn't become rich by accident. She doesn't wake up one day in luxury because of fate. She made choices long before the rewards arrived. She chose discipline over comfort, clarity over chaos, long-term vision over short-term pleasure. She didn't wait for the perfect moment. She created it. She chose to be the leader of her life, not the victim of it. The poor maid often feels like she has no choice. That's the trap. She's surrounded by routines that feel permanent, by people who say this is just how life is. She hears those words so many times she starts to believe them. But I've seen it with my own eyes. People from the toughest backgrounds, the most limited resources, rise up and transform their lives simply because they made a different decision. They chose to stop blaming and start building. They chose to grow instead of stay stuck. When I started my first business, I had nothing. No funding, no reputation, no safety net. People told me it was foolish. You're wasting your time, they said. But I had made a choice. I would rather fail chasing something meaningful than succeed living someone else's small version of life. That decision shaped everything that came next. Every late night, every rejection, every setback, I faced it not as a victim, but as a person who had already chosen to keep going. It's not about choosing once. It's about choosing every day. Every morning you have the choice to stay in bed or rise early. You have the choice to scroll through distractions or learn something new. You have the choice to complain or to create. These small moments, these quiet, personal decisions build your future. And when you look back, you won't remember one huge choice that changed everything. You'll see thousands of small ones that together shape who you became. And yes, it's hard. Of course it is. Making the right choice doesn't always feel good. Sometimes it means walking away from people you love because they're not helping you grow. Sometimes it means taking a risk when fear is screaming at you to play it safe. Sometimes it means starting over with nothing but belief in yourself. I've done all of that. I've stood in rooms where I didn't feel smart enough, strong enough, or respected enough. But I had already made a decision. I would not go back to the life where I had no control. When you make the choice to grow, to rise, to fight for your vision, something changes inside you. You stop begging the world to see your value, and you start living like you already know it. You stop asking for permission and start taking responsibility. That's when the real shift happens. Not just in your mindset, but in your actions, your energy, your results. The truth is, no one is born a rich wife or a poor maid. Life gives you a starting point, but after that, it's all up to you. Every thought, every habit, every environment, every hour, it's a choice. And you don't have to be perfect. You just have to be committed. You just have to say, I choose to rise, and then prove it with your actions again and again. Because in the end, the most powerful decision you'll ever make is to stop waiting and start becoming.